So the Department of Space, as you are aware, carries out the end-to-end space activities, which include, one second. Yeah, which includes as the design, development, and realization of launch vehicles. We have design, development, and realization of the spacecrafts, the launch and post-launch activities, and space-based services. So these four major verticals define the activities of Department of Space. And how do you carry out these activities? We need to have infrastructure and facilities of various ISRO centers which are being extensively used for this. Research carried out in academia, and maybe all of you are aware, more than 500 industries are involved in these activities, and they produce the components. And it is indeed noteworthy that 80% of the launch vehicle and 60% of the spacecraft budget is spent in industry. This message or this particular fact may not be known to many people. That's why we wanted to stress this point. And what is the kind of activities that is emerging in the space sector now? If you look at it, the space-based services and applications have grown in multitude, much more than that what we really envisaged, we really thought. They have spiraled, and the demands and the requirements are phenomenal. And this particular demand can be really made use of. They have a huge commercial potential. And the private sector, as on now, is engaging in space activities, and they are much eager now. We are getting a lot of inputs, a lot of discussions are coming, a lot of people are coming forward for making the launch vehicle, for making the satellites, and especially providing the space-based services. So definitely, it is a fact, and we very strongly believe that participation of the private sector in the end-to-end space activities is definitely a strategy to expand the space economy. And the major reform or the major announcement or the major decision that the government of India has recently done is the opening of the space sector, and a series of reforms have been suggested. Then the government of India has approved the space sector reforms for the greater participation of the private sector in these activities. So what are these activities? The private sector is allowed now to carry out end-to-end space activities through suitable enabling mechanism. We have made announcement of opportunity to industries to come forward with new technologies and new processes. And ISRO will definitely, as Secretary DO is told, will focus on development of new technologies and at the same time enabling the sharing of its facilities to the private sector. As you are aware, ISRO is having a huge infrastructure, and especially many of the facilities or the kind of test equipments that we have may not be available in the country, and it is always worthwhile to engage the private sector in utilizing these things, so that it is a win-win situation wherein the private sector also need not invest in those infrastructure. And we also have Department of Space has New Space India Limited, NSIL, which is our public sector unit, to own operational launch vehicles, satellites, and services. I will at a later chart or later slide, I will dwell upon the New Space India Limited, the gamut and the requirements or the responsibilities of NSIL has been changed or added, augmented. So let me also reiterate here that, as Dr. Shivan specifically told, the idea of these reforms does not mean that ISRO is getting privatized. This we want to stress here, because the basic idea is, unlike the earlier times or the present times where the entire activities related to space is being carried out by ISRO end to end, we are now enabling the private sector also to carry out their space activities, be it a launch vehicle making, be it a satellite making, or be it the space related services. The private enterprises are allowed to carry out their activities. And as I told earlier, for that we need a mechanism to enable them, to promote them, to handhold them, at the same time to regulate them. So that is a mechanism that we are introducing here, so that things will be much more easier and user friendly for the private sector to carry out their operations. At the same time, it also should be noted that the primary purpose of this activity is also to see that the burden on the government is getting reduced, and the private sector is encouraged to invest more on such activities to carry out their space-based activities. So what does the private sector can do? What we feel or what we envisage is, as I said earlier, the building of the launch vehicles and providing the launch services, building and launching satellites, owning satellites and operating them, and providing the space-based services. These are the four major pillars that we feel that the private sectors can actively engage. So what does the DOS will do? DOS will enable these private players to accomplish whatever I told earlier, the space activities. How do we do that? We have to promote and handhold these private players to enable them. And we can share our facilities, our expertise, our technology, our knowledge. And as the case may be, it can be free of cost or it may be at a reasonable cost, which can be worked out case by case. And definitely a mechanism is required to do that, so that the most important thing is the creation of a national level autonomous nodal agency. Is an independent agency which is going to permit and monitor the private sector space activities as per the defined regulatory provisions, and permit the usage of ISRO facilities as per the private sector's requirements, and promote and handhold these private players. So a mechanism is required, and that is what Dr. Shivan was mentioning in his address. And for all these things, one of the primary requisites we feel is the enactment of the Space Activity Bill. As you are already aware, the Space Activity Bill is in almost it's in final shape now. We have already presented it to the our ministry, PMO, for giving the for doing the inter-ministerial consultation, and we feel that very soon this will be cabinet approved. This will be approved by cabinet and presented to Parliament for making it an act. This is mandatory because, as you know, India is a signatory to the Outer Space Treaty. So, this activity bill, which defines what are all the regulations and what are all the kind of liabilities that will have, is essential. So the mechanism, what is the mechanism that we are introducing? It is the establishment of an Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center in space, which is again an autonomous nodal agency under the Department of Space, which will be doing the enabling the promotion and hand holding of the industries, building of the launch vehicles and satellites, sharing of the ISRO facilities, as I told earlier, establishment of facilities in DOS premises. That's very important. Many of these facilities may not be available outside, especially if you talk about having a launch pad, because each of these private enterprises may be coming out with their own launch vehicles, and the present interfaces may not be adequate or it may not suit. So what we are telling is that we will enable them to establish the launch pads in those premises, and definitely the launch campaign and launch has to be authorized, and they need the licensing and the regulatory mechanisms or approvals for the space-based services. And another very important and very responsible activity that InSpace needs to carry out is a drawing up of an integrated launch manifest, which is based on because you know now there are three sets of players in the space sector now. Based on this, we have the ISRO, we have the NSIL, which takes care of the commercial requirements of ISRO, and we have the private sector. So there's definitely there can be conflict of interest, there can be conflict with respect to time, with respect to facility, with respect to resources. So all approved or all agreeable an integrated launch manifest will be required, and InSpace is now assigned the responsibility of doing that job. Now, what is the architecture of InSpace? it is an empowered national body. It has a board. I will come to the constitution of the board. And apart from the board, it has its own directorates, which takes care of the many of the various facets of the activities related to in space. We have a technical directorate, we have a legal directorate, we have a safety and security directorate, and we have a single directorate of for monitoring and promotion activities. So the basically what will happen is the private players or the NCIL or ISRO will be the act as applicants, and they will be applying to the in space secretariat, and the directorates will go through those applications and accordingly advise the board to give the appropriate directives and appropriate decisions, and the board will act based on the inputs from the space activity bill, the different policies. We have specifically mentioned here the SATCOM policy, the remote sensing policy, the navigation policy, and we have some more which is in the annual. I'll be explaining that in a later stage. And based on this, they will give a directive so that then they will permit the space activities by private players, the integrated launch manifest they will make, the launch campaign and the launch also they will permit, and they will also, depending on the requirement and the ISRO's requirements, they will be allowing the sharing of ISRO facilities also. So this very briefly represents the various activities that InSpace needs to carry out. Now, it will have the InSpace will have a very defined institution with its own cadre for manning its various activities like secretariat activities, the administration, and the activities of the directorates. It will be chaired by a secretary grade officer, and it is fully empowered to take absolutely independent, unbiased decisions. And the composition of the board will have members from InSpace itself, especially the directors of the directorates, then members from industries, the members from academia, and definitely members from DOS. And what is mandated now is whatever decisions that InSpace makes will be binding on all the stakeholders. They have to do. And as I told earlier, there is a directorate for monitoring and promotion, and that inbuilt monitoring mechanism ensures that implementation of the decisions are properly done. And in case of any conflict, in case if it arises, we have our Space Commission, and above that we have the existing TDSAT, which is proposed now as an appellate body for resolving the conflicts. Now, again, coming to the composition of the InSpace, as I said, there will be a secretary grade person as chairman, and we have full-time members as part of InSpace. We'll have members from industry, academia, and from DOS. And the directorates, as I mentioned earlier, we have a technical directorate, safety and security directorate, legal directorate, and promotion and monitoring directorate. The promotion and monitoring directorate also have the responsibility to see that the quality, reliability are also maintained. Now, I'm giving two examples to indicate or to make you aware that the entire process we want to streamline and make it user-friendly and simple without any complication. So that is why these next two slides we are depicting that. Basically, the application by the private player will be given to the office in an online portal. As I said earlier, the technical directorate, the legal directorate, and the other directorates will go through that, and the InSpace board will review it, and the permission will be granted for a particular activity as sought by the applicant. And these activities, while it is carrying out, will be monitored by the promotion and monitoring directorate, and appropriate feedbacks will again go to the board, so that it's a complete closed loop system which makes the entire process very stable. And we also have the provision to see that these activities are regularly apprised to the Space Commission. So this brings a very unambiguous and a transparent procedure to all. And as I said earlier, we have provisions for resolution of disputes if at all anything is coming. And the application process, for example, if somebody wants to share the facility of ISRO, they can directly apply on online portal. The InSpace board will discuss based on the inputs given by the various directorates, and it will give a decision, and it will identify the facility that is required, which is available in the ISRO facility, and will inform directly to the applicant or the private player, as well as it will inform the center, the facility in charge of the center where the facility is going to be utilized, and the activity will be carried out. And I said earlier, the closed loop system will automatically act through the promotion and monitoring directorate. So the system is very simple and straightforward, no complications. And in case they want to establish a facility, as I said earlier, the same process is followed. The space allocation facility establishment, the board will decide. It will be informed to the concerned center as well as the applicant, and the closed loop system will act. So we feel that this simplified mechanism will work in a very seamless manner. And we also have ISRO has also announced announcement of opportunities for the private sector has been also already done. It will identify the cutting edge technology areas which industry can look into, and basically aid the activities of ISRO space activities. And we also plan to give opportunities in selected science and exploration missions to the industry, and definitely technology spin-offs will be offered for a mass production. What we are trying to say is that the technology that we are using for space can be modified for commercial use, and that product, the modified product from the space technology, can be mass produced for the public use. So that will be a huge benefit to the country. Now, as a part of this or a starting of this, we have already announced the opportunities for the Human in Space Flight program, and the last date is 31st August 2020. All the details are given in ISRO website, wherein various phases or various activities related to the space flight program has been announced. For example, like debris management and mitigation, space bioengineering, radiation hazards characterization, thermal protection system, etc. So a gamut of activities are identified, and we already have a very good response, and we feel that this will be a huge this will make a huge impact in the whole of Indian academia and the students as well as the industry. And now let me come back to NSIL. As I told earlier, NSIL is the PSU of ISRO, which is mandate. Earlier, the mandate of NSIL was exclusively like the production of PSLV and our SSLV, small satellite launch vehicle production through the Indian industry. Then, of course, providing the launch services for customer satellites and space-based services and technology transfer to Indian industry. These were the scope of NSIL, and the basic idea was that the commercial exploitation of ISRO space products and services should be focused, and Indian industry's growth also should be encouraged. Now, the total mandate has been enhanced. Now, NSIL is mandated to own the satellites and providing space services on commercial basis. This is a quantum change or quantum jump, I would say. And it is also mandated to build satellites and launch them as per the demand. As I said earlier, the whole process has been changed to a demand-driven from supply-driven. That is a huge strategic change, I would say. The NSIL also has mandated to provide launch services for customer satellites. It is mandated to build launch vehicles, not only PSLV, but SSLV, GSLV, GSLV Mark III, and the future launches that ISRO is going to further make. And it also should enable satellite building through Indian industry. And as I said, that remains. Technology transfer to industry is still there. And so that the scope has changed, it is becoming highly complex and capital intensive activities. The performing the operational missions of ISRO is a huge responsibility, and it also involves owning the satellites and space-based assets. So NSIL ultimately will act as a satellite operator itself. So this is a huge change, and NSIL is actively gearing up for taking up this responsibility and carrying it out. So, as I said earlier, all these are possible only if you have a real infrastructure or a structure for the regulation and authorization and control. So, the space activity bill is a mandatory for this, but definitely it is not. The space activity bill will not be a real prerequisite for carrying out the initial activities of these end-to-end space activities that private industries can start now itself. But ultimately, at the time of the final act, like launching or making a satellite and giving it for launch, etc. Before that, these regulatory mechanism will be definitely required. So it defines the space activities and associated risks and liabilities. That's the most important part, and defines the regulatory norms. Then the policies are also extremely important. So the present SATCOM policy and remote sensing policies has already been revisited. A series of committees have already reviewed the new strategy that we have involved or included in that policies, and that has been already reviewed. And very soon, these policies are going to be announced and introduced. Apart from that, as you are aware, we are getting into the navigation aspects and the applications in a very big way. So there is a need for evoking a navigation policy. This also is almost on the finishing stages. Apart from these three policies, we also now feel, based on our discussions, that we need to have a space exploration policy, and also we need to have a launch vehicle kind of policy. So these also are being worked out, so that it will bring more clarity with respect to the private players or the private enterprises as to how to plan and strategize their specific activities. So with this, let me conclude. I think I have covered the whole gambit of the uh, reforms that we are planning in a reasonably in a short presentation.
Let me briefly elaborate on the purpose of the space sector reforms, which government introduced and which is going to be a real game change in the space sector in India. You all know that private sector participation in the space program has been increasing worldwide. Private sector participation in space sector is a healthy trend as it increases the diversity in the space program. In India, we also have seen space sector startup taking up developmental activities in both the launch vehicle as well as the satellite field. However, there was no mechanism available in the country to extend any kind of technology or infrastructure support to them. Moreover, there was no regulatory mechanism to control the private sector activities because space activities, it is not a normal activity. It is having a lot of strategic importance. Also, that you know that it have a lot of risky elements also there. And being government of India is a signatory to the international community, any space activities, any destruction or anything happen, the responsibility, whether it's by government of India, from agency or by private agencies, this has to be responsibilities which lies with the government of India. This is the reason we want a mechanism to regulate these activities. As part of ongoing reform, government of India has now created an institutional mechanism within Department of Space known as Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Sector, that is InSpace. The space sector reforms in the Vikram Sarabhai's centenary year is of great symbolic value as it aims to widen the space industry base within the country. In addition, the New Space India Limited, a central PSU, has been empowered to carry out routine launches with industry realized PSLV and the satellite. When space sector reforms were announced by the government, there were many misconceptions like it would lead to privatization of ISRO. It is no. Again, I'm repeating, it is not the privatization of ISRO. In fact, the whole mechanism, the whole aim of the system is enabling the private people to carry out the space activity which otherwise being done by ISRO. It is not privatization of ISRO. And in fact, that the activities of ISRO are going to increase with the time, and ISRO will be able to better utilize its resources in taking up the developmental as well as capacity building activities of the government India rather than the routine production activities. Mainly, we are going to concentrate on the technology development, capacity building, and increasing our activity to the level of international level. ISRO, in addition to that, ISRO will also facilitate private sector participation in major national missions through announcement of opportunity. However, one important aspect which has to be made clear again is that private sector will have to do their own research and development activities, business viability studies, funding, as well as finding customers for their services, which otherwise right now being done by ISRO, which we are giving, allowing the private people to carry out this activity. The role of InSpace will be limited to providing technical know-how and infrastructure support in gap areas and at the same time promotion and the ideas and advices. In addition, InSpace will also act as a regulatory body for private sector, private activities, space activities. One thing which has emerged during this pandemic is the importance of health as well as self-reliance. Good health is essential for high productivity. Government is taking proactive steps to make our country self-reliant in many areas. As part of this process, import of communication satellite is now in the embargo list. I'm extremely happy that the government has taken such step under that Atmanirbhar Bharat. And I am sure that this is going to continue and we are going to depend more and more on self-reliance. The capacity expansion in 4G services and introduction of 5G services will require large number of communication satellites to be launched in the immediate future. This could be a huge opportunity for ISRO, NSIL, and more importantly, for the private sector players. And I want not ISRO or NSIL, the private sector should get into this business. They have a lot of potential in this area. Launching small satellite is another area where there is a huge projected demand. And I'm very happy that some of the startups are initiated this activity. They are interacting with us. I'm very happy that they are in very advanced stage and they are going to launch their launch vehicles very soon. With in-space mechanism in place, ISRO is gearing up to handhold as well as provide all possible support in terms of technology and infrastructure to ensure that your space endeavors succeed not only at national level but also at a global level. And I'm sure that academia, industry, as well as startup will make use of this opportunity in the right earnest and will contribute towards achieving self-reliance in the critical space sector technology. Thank you. Jai Hind.